Today was a bummer. So I'm back at the room. Rent is probably not happening. Oh well. I'll catch up on some reading while I can. The fire. It doesn't interest me to know. Oh, my bad. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. Sometimes we go out and seek the fire that will burn away what is DOS in our lives. More often, we awake suddenly to find ourselves encircled by flame. Intense experiences of the heart will transform us, and I want to know if you can stand with me, eyes wide open, when the fire, asked for or unbidden, consumes all we think that we know. I want to know if you will offer yourself as fuel for the flames and let the mystery we seek, the divine we long for, which comes in unpredictable ways, consume and transform you. Talking about fire, we forget what it's really like. It is only in the stories of our burning and rising from the ashes that we remember the flame. 5 years ago in my kitchen, I stood talking with my friend, and everything was as it had been, more or less, for 38 years. And in one moment, she raised a hand to the right side of her head and complained of a sudden headache. Everything changed. This is what it is like. After the fire, nothing is ever the same again. Remembering, I see the scenes in slow motion without sound but in vivid color. I see myself as if viewing a stranger moving across the black and white floor tiles, my forehead creased with concern, putting an arm around Catherine and moving toward her chair. My arm feels inadequately slender around her solid body, and there is no evidence that something is seriously wrong, but I'm suddenly certain that we must get to a hospital. I see us walking down the front steps of my house, Catherine getting into my front seat of my small red car parked at the curb. She complains of nausea, so I hand her a green plastic mixing bowl, which she carefully places on her lap after fastening her seatbelt. I can hear the seatbelt click. I can hear the children laughing on the sidewalk in the late afternoon sun as we drive down the street, but I notice them on the periphery of my vision running and tossing a ball. I see myself driving and Catherine vomiting into the plastic bowl. I keep driving. The bolt rumbles up to the floor of the car in slow motion, cascade as Catherine convulses twice. Her eyes roll back and her body strains against the seatbelt that holds her in place, and she becomes finally still, her head hanging forward, swinging with the motion of the car. Her body slumped lifeless. It's like watching a movie with the soundtrack turned off. For a moment, I do not recognize the driver of the car. Her face, my face, has become unfamiliar with fear. My mouth opens. I hear no sound, but I see the shape of two words. Catherine, no. What happens next is harder to see. The memories, disjointed sensations, broken thoughts. I know she's dead. I reject this information, and I know the hospital is 5 minutes away. I know 5 minutes will be too late. As I continue driving, my attention splits, and I feel as if I'm reaching up, straining towards the sky. There's a wrenching sensation of muscles being pulled away from the bone, and then a feeling of being catapulted out of the car. Suddenly, I can see the roof of the car, the tops of the trees along the street, fresh green in the spring warmth, and above me something glimmering like a long silver liquid balloon drifting toward the clouds, the string dangling. I lunge for it, grab it, and pull down. My body jerks with a violent shiver, a sensation similar to the jolt that sometimes pulls me back from the threshold of sleep as I drift off at night. My hands ache where they are gripping the steering wheel, and I am aware once again of the street before me and Catherine's body hanging on the seatbelt, rising and falling now with her breath. Needing to hear the sound of my own voice, I tell her to keep breathing, to hang on. I try to swallow, and I cannot. A voice whispers, "If you panic now, she is dead." For the first time in my life, I have an overwhelming desire to scream. As I drive, I keep holding on, wrapping myself around the shining filament I've pulled down from the sky and anchoring it there in the soft, round body beside me. I will not let go. My breath is ragged. My arms quiver slightly with fatigue. A silent prayer comes without thought. Help me. I'll never get to her to the hospital like this. Please help me. When we are approaching the end of the block, it has been no more than 2 minutes since we walked to the car. As we near the intersection, I hear a voice, quiet and calm. Drive into the intersection and lean on the horn. I do not hesitate at the stop sign, but I drive blindly into the intersection, horn blasting. A police car coming along the street to my left screeches to a halt next to us. Things speed up. An ambulance arrives. Twice on the way to the hospital, Catherine is resuscitated. The surgeon at first refuses to operate. The damage from the aneurysm is too great. He is sure she will not live, or if she does, she will have no brain function. A compact, efficient man with silver hair, he is matter of fact in his assessment. I wait. I hang on. Alone at her bedside, after the doctor has left, I hold her hand and speak softly and fervently. You can come back, Catherine. It doesn't matter what you hear them say. You can come back to your life, completely, fully recovered if you want to. I believe this to be true. Hours pass. Roger, her husband, arrives. The doctors operate to stop the bleeding, and Catherine slips into a coma. We sit in the intensive care unit beside her comatose form, wires and tubes, monitors flashing. After 5 weeks, the chaplain begins to talk of taking her off the respirator and letting her die. Roger asks me what I think he should do, and I go off to sit alone in the park. The park is a busy place full of winos, squirrels, and pigeons. I find a spot under one of the largest maple trees, and there I let the sounds of the city rise and fall around me as I follow the rhythm of my breath, closing my eyes and waiting for my thoughts to drift away. There was a time when I would have been afraid to sit so open and relaxed in a downtown park, but these are fearless days. I've seen how fast everything can change. There is no time to waste on fearing what might happen. The scavengers of the park might sense my lack of vulnerability. None approach. They leave me into my solitude. It doesn't take long. For 5 weeks, I have kept one part of my attention linked to Catherine wherever I am. I find the stillness easily to call to her now, seeing her smiling before me. Catherine has been my student for 5 years, coming to participate in workshops, often assisting with the cooking and cleaning. I sat at her bedside and held her hand after 2 miscarriages. She brought me just some warm juice and warm muffins in the morning when I was ill. Sitting on my great-grandmother's quilt sipping tea, we told each other our night dreams. I love her and she trusts me. She looks at me now in my mind's eye and arches her eyebrows in a familiar gesture of inquiry. They're thinking of turning off the respirator, Catherine. Roger has to give them a decision. Her face becomes serious and thoughtful. What do you want to do? I ask. She hesitates. I need 24 hours, she says. I nod, blink, and open my eyes to the blinding sunlight bouncing off the sidewalk. Roger tells the chaplain he will make the decision in 24 hours. 18 hours later, Catherine comes out of the coma, and for one moment more, I allow myself to imagine that everything has not been changed, that what we thought we knew remained intact. The respirator tube comes out and Catherine regains her voice. She recognized me and her mother, but asked me to identify the man in the picture beside her bed. It is her husband, Roger. While she remembers all of the prayers and songs we have learned together, she does not know how to use a toothbrush or a spoon. She seems strangely detached from what has happened to her. Her emotional effect is flat. Over time, bits and pieces are found and woven back into the fabric of memory and daily function. But it remains a patchwork quilt, with some squares missing and others reappearing unpredictably only to vanish again. Short-term memory loss is hard. It's really, really hard. Today, after five years after the surgery, she remains physically and mentally handicapped. She needs care 24 hours a day. She has changed forever, and so am I. When Catherine's brain aneurysm burst, all I had learned, all I had worked for, was on the line, and it wasn't enough. I wanted to save her, to restore her to what she was. What an incredible arrogance. What an amazing innocence. A hero's skills and courage could not do what was needed. I was confronted with the illusion of my belief that I could make things right when it really mattered, if I simply tried hard enough. And I couldn't. And if all of my work could not ensure some basic immunity for tragedy for those I loved, then what was the point of what I was learning and teaching? Why was I working so hard? To continue, I had to live differently. I had to find the ability to live with the vastness of what I did not know and what I cannot control. I don't know whether I did the right thing reaching for Catherine and pulling her back. I don't know if in fact that is what I did, although Catherine's account of what happens coincides with my experience of doing just that. I doubt that I would do it differently if I could do it again, even though I have often thought it would be easier for Catherine and those who love her. Easier for me if she had died. I do not know why she chose to come back. I don't know if she really had a choice, although she feels she did. Standing in the center of the fire with Catherine changed me. I developed a level of ruthless honesty and an almost physical aversion in the small daily lies that we sometimes tell ourselves. If life is precious and fragile, I do not want to waste one moment on polite half-truths. So when a student I care about, weeping and broken, tells me that she cannot imagine how her husband of 18 years could have lied to her so consistently during their marriage, that it is not in her to understand this kind of subterfuge, I tell her as gently as I can, of course you can, because you also lied for 18 years to yourself. You abandoned yourself and pretended not to see the truth, and that's the hard part. I could not save Catherine. All I could do was refuse to close my eyes and my heart as the fire surrounded us both. Refuse to soften the edges with comforting explanations. Whether of God's plan or karmic lessons, I could not know to be true. Sometimes this is the only choice we have, to refuse or agree to stay awake as we are torn open by what is beyond our control. And I found that I can do it if I choose to. I can stay awake and let the sorrows of the world tear me apart, and then allow the joys to put me back together different from before, but whole once again. Tell me about the fires of your transformation that have swept through your life. Were you alone? Or did you have a friend? Someone who loved you there by your side, with their eyes wide open, gripping your hand in her tears? Catherine's refusal to let go of my hand when the fire surrounded us sustained and challenged all that I knew. A year after coming out of the coma, Catherine attends a women's retreat I am leading at a wilderness campsite, sitting propped up on an inflated mattress set on the ground, listening inside that is partly paralyzed. Catherine is surrounded by cedars and hemlocks and the sound of a dozen women talking and laughing as they gather and cut firewood. Her close-fitting cap, the kind with the ear flaps, sits tightly askew, exposing the place on her forehead where the bone is sunken, and a round indentation about the size of $1 of a coin. She does takes great concentration, and periodically, one of the women carrying wood hands her a small branch. Slowly, laboriously, she breaks off twigs and stacks them on the ground beside her legs. She has been doing this for over an hour. The pile of broken sticks is about 3 inches high. She wants to help, to participate in the wood gathering. I stop for a moment to watch her. She looks up and smiles at me, and I try to smile back, to breathe past the ache in my chest that comes whenever I watch her. I go over to sit on the ground beside her. There is a politeness, a formality in Catherine's speech that was not there before. It creates a strange distance between us. Since she came out of the coma, her tone has been consistently without emotion. I have not seen her cry. Suddenly, she reaches for my hand with her own and leans toward me. I want to thank you for making it possible for me to be here. I try to smile, my throat closing. I want you to know, I know I wouldn't be here at all alive if it wasn't for you. I rub the ache in my chest away with the heel of my hand, striking with feigned casualness and forcing my voice to sound matter of fact. You chose to live, Catherine. Yes, her voice is very soft as if she's trying not to startle me. I did. But you gave me that choice. I was so scared and so confused. And you reached out and grabbed me and held me. And you stayed right there with me through all of those days and nights. The forbidden words come out in a rush. I sometimes wonder if I did you any favor. She squeezes my hand, and I know it must be hard for you to watch your friend. But no matter how hard it seems or how much she struggles, she has never regretted coming back. She is glad to be alive and wants you to know this. Her reference to herself in the third person is disorienting. She often mixes her pronouns, but this is different. It is as if she is speaking to me of the Catherine I knew before, as if the woman, she was still in there, silent and unseen. I want to talk to that woman, to the Catherine that I knew for just 1 minute and tell her how much I love her. I just want 1 minute with her to say goodbye. She watches me closely. Life is still good. I want to believe her, but how is it still good, the life she has? I've learned a lot. Her voice is small, almost tentative. Really? I ask, a sucker for learning. I reach for something that would make it all worthwhile. Well, what? Well, she mulls. I've learned to live fully in the present. She lets out a short laugh. It's all that I've got, and I can't remember what just happened or what's planned next. She pauses and looks out over the lake, her own eyes for the first time full of tears. Her voice is hoarse. She speaks very slowly, and I've learned that really bad things can happen to me. I put my arm around her, and she leaned her scarred forehead against mine, silent tears down our cheeks. Suddenly, the long, eerie call of the loon splits the silence and echoes off of the lake of the 3 birds that land on the water in front of us. 2 males and 1 female. All the women working in the clearing pause to watch them. Where is his mate? Catherine asked, referring to the extra male. Adult loons mate for life and are generally seen in pairs. They left here together last fall, but he returned alone in the spring, I tell her. She must have died on the journey. The loon opens his bill and sends out his lonely call across the lake as if to confirm my story. He will be alone now, then. Catherine's voice is once again slow and emotionless. Yes, I answer, he will be alone. We sit quietly and watch the birds swim across the lake. The late afternoon sun sparkling on the water. The smell of cedar and wood smoke mingling with the first hint of autumn in the air. The loon call to one another, their intermittent song strangely mournful and yet hauntingly beautiful. It is a sound that always makes me feel like I'm being beckoned, called home, reminded of something or some place I thought that I could never forget. After a few moments, Catherine turns to me and squeezes my hand, her eyes bright, her face open and smiling. Is this not the most beautiful place, this earth that we live on? I can't help but smile back. Yes, Catherine, it is. Ugh. This book makes me bawl every single time that I read it. I love it, though, because it's so relatable. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back soon.